a special message from this month's presenting sponsor. Learn about Baltimore's rich industrial legacy through working galleries that explore the history of the Bethlehem Steel Mill, an antique print shop, a garment loft, and more at the Baltimore Museum of Industry, the BMI. Hours and information at thebmi.org. Also, use the code TRUTH50, that is TRUTH50, my special code, and get 50% off of admission at the front desk or use it when purchasing the tickets online. So please visit thebmi.org and make that trip today. That's right, friends. Union Craft Brewing is 10 years old, and we're glowing with excitement to announce that our annual celebration is back. Come one, come all to throw down once again for one night only to help us mark this milestone. This year, we're doing it up in neon. Neon has the atomic number of 10 and lends itself to the kind of visual stimulation that we love to party with. Get your neon brew crew ready to eat, drink, and dance the night away. This year, we've invited two very special guests to help you do just that. All the way from Nigeria, West Africa, we're thrilled to welcome Femi Kuti with Made Kuti and the Positive Force Band. The son and grandson of Afrobeat legend Fela Kuti, Femi and his son Made carry the torch of this music and will be sure to make you shake it up to their hot grooves and positive message. Also, Fred Armisen has made us laugh more times than we can count. From his work on SNL to his send-up of hipsterdom on Portlandia, Fred is coming down to the brewery to DJ for us on the main stage and create a dance party you will not soon forget. Of course, there will be beer. So much beer. I mean, like, totally. Just lots of beer. From classics, the sours, lagers, barrel-aged beers from our workshop by the Union series, new collabs, and other special anniversary beers will be pouring aplenty. Get your tickets and save that date, June 11th. 10 years. Can you believe it? Like seriously, 10 years? Really? Let's glow, guys. Get your tickets at unioncraftbrewing.com. Welcome to The Truth in His Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and today's guest is a Baltimore-based artist whose path into animation can be summed up as one long, inevitable surprise. Please welcome Nick McKernan. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm doing great. How are you, Rob?
I am living a dream. Living the dream.
Every day, baby.
So let's start off by describing your work and talking about how you found your creative niche.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm mostly a 2D animator. I work digitally, but recently I've done a lot of music video stuff, which has been super cool. And it's weird because I also my day job is doing corporate animation in Washington, D.C., which is such a different universe from when I was in school, which they essentially at least I went to MICA in Baltimore. They pretty much let you go wild. They're like, oh yeah, do whatever you want, whatever. And so I ended up partnering with a friend of mine who plays music as Han Julius over in Portland, Oregon. And we've been friends for forever, and they were working on a new album. So I was I was in an animated music video class at MICA, and we were like, this might be the perfect opportunity for us to collaborate because I actually have an assignment that's due. So, and you have an album that's coming out, so we could really just, what better time? And so that kind of, for me, I was doing a lot of different, messing around a lot of different types of animation before that, but getting into music video stuff with Han, it's this perfect kind of moment where everything started to really make sense as far as what kind of animation that I really, that was super personal to me, which is strange that a collaboration would bring out what exactly animation means on a personal level, but it just did. Yeah.
So it's essentially starting off this is a good opportunity for us to combine our deadlines together.
Exactly. It's okay, two birds, one stone.
Engage.
Exactly. Sometimes it's like that.
So I read that you performed as a stage actor, musician, filmmaker between various hospitality and education jobs before discovering that intense love for animation. So can you tell the listeners about discovering your love for animation, and what about animation really clicked for you where like acting and filmmaking necessarily didn't?
Yeah, it took me a long time. As someone, I'm 27 years old now, and I took time off of school. I originally went to 1 year when I still lived over on the West Coast, and then I dropped out of college and spent like 4 years essentially just doing those types of jobs. I moved up to Seattle, and I was in a band for 3 years, and that was just my life. Like I was just in a band. And people would be like, "So what do you do?" I'd be like, "I work at a movie theater, but I really care about this band." Like we're, and it was like at that time I did not want to be an animator. I had no idea that I was going to fall down this gigantic rabbit hole. I had loved throughout high school and stuff. I had picked up a camera and had no idea what I was actually doing. Just like shooting short films and stuff with friends and that classic thing. But like on a technical level, I was a complete disaster. Like if someone was like, "So what is the focal length of your camera?" I'd be like, "What?" Or like other kind of technical things. I've never been like a super technically minded person. I'm always like gut instinct and thinking with my heart, which has created interesting projects. But around the time when the band was kind of coming to an end in Seattle, I was doing a lot of soul searching on what it meant to be an independent artist because, I was working like very musically, but still collaboratively with a bunch of people. And then that kind of got taken away. Like it kind of fell apart in a way that was no one's fault, but I was thinking a lot more about how can I like self-sustain myself as an artist? What do I like to do? I'm like, I always loved film. I loved acting. And expression in this kind of way. And I was super into Avatar and The Legend of Korra around that time. The Legend of Korra in particular. I was super obsessed with that show. And had always been a huge fan of like Studio Ghibli. And I think I was just like, it wasn't even that I felt like I would be good at it. It was just that I had like at that period in my life, just a weirdly like overwhelming like love of the medium where I was like, the things that are giving me the most like joy in my life right now are all like animation. And I was following so many animators and creatives and stuff and some comic artists too. And I was just like, I was getting so much from that I was just like, I want to pour some stuff into that too. And then I think I got like a bootlegged copy of Photoshop and then started messing around. It was like, got this idea. I like moved back home for a year and worked at a school. I was like an education assistant for a bunch of like first graders and stuff. And throughout that whole year, I was just trying to build out a portfolio to apply to schools. And that was like my big goal. I was like, I'm going to try and get into an art school and then study animation. And it just became this thing to move towards. Like, I wasn't exactly sure how it would go. I wasn't super confident of myself as like an animator. Like I didn't really know too much, but it just was this thing to work towards. It was totally the thing that got me waking up every day in a way that gave my life a sense of like it was like a North Star that I was moving towards. It was like, animation has just been, I think it was the right thing because I've never since like that initial decision have gotten bored with animation. It is like, I think what we all kind of hope to find, that thing that even if you go through ups and downs with it on a personal level, it's like as a thing that exists in the universe, it's like, it's never going to be fully tapped or explored. It's just this well of discovery and everyone approaches it differently. And it's just always been like it's the right thing to be so focused on. I think for me at least.
No, I'm hearing that, and I think when you find a love for something that you're doing, and whether it keeps you interested and keeps bringing you back, and it just keeps rewarding you. And I found that way, and it's not the same, but I think it may have some similarities. Like, naturally, I'm a problem solver, and I got into a coding class, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Initially I was like, I think I'm going to suck at this. And then I started doing it. I got a necessity for work. And once it started to click, I was like, no, this is going to keep me interested. How can I make this faster? How can I make this more interesting? How can I add this type of script to this other script and then have it spit out this as a return? That's the thing that kind of caught me, and that's what interests me. And I'll leave this one with you, which I thought is kind of funny. My partner's son, he talks about, like, look, man, I'm finally watching TV with real people. He's like, everything was just animation for the last few years. It was just like, look, I get all of my feelings and all of my emotions, all of the life lessons I've gotten is from anime. And I was like, wow.
I love that.
It's really funny. So let's talk about your first assignment. Your first assignment to animate. What was that like? Were you nervous? What was the character, film, project? What was it? And what was the feedback?
Oh, wow. The first project that, let's see, at school.
Sure.
Yeah, so different when it comes to the job.
Because I was designing some corporate like paper clip, and like, what?
With school, yeah. I mean, I think, like, I don't know. I sympathize with everyone who's really starting it to begin with, because it feels kind of like, I'm sure coding feels like at the beginning, where it's just every single, like, quote unquote, like, rule to, like, things that make animation look real, for, like, weight, like, or kind of, the way that you're spacing out your keyframes or something. It's, unless you've been doing it for a while, it all really feels completely like against every instinct that you might have. Sometimes I think the best ways to get into animation are, like, weirdly not in a class setting, but are those moments where you're just like, where you're almost just going, like, sequentially, like, you're not mapping out what you want to do. It's just that simple thing of, like, frame one is a cloud. How can you transform that cloud just flipping through pages without an end goal? Just to see after the fact, like, how it actually looks, like, how fast is it? How slow? It's like, weirdly with animation, like, you can get so technical so fast. And I think technical stuff is really helpful, sure. But maintaining a sense of, like, freedom and kind of a sense of energy and flow I think that's the thing that it's the thing that's harder to teach. And the thing that I think is weirdly the most inviting thing for a newcomer is, like, oh, you already have that inside of you. You're going to be making images that are going to be, whatever is kind of coming out of you, flowing out of you. They might be failures, but, I think that's a really important thing to lean on, especially in those first assignments, where my first assignment was, like, the bouncing ball one, which is the classic. Like, I don't know if coding has a like very foundational thing that everyone starts out on,
like Hello World.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But yeah, the first one is a bouncing ball, and it's essentially like animating with guardrails on, because it's like, this is like, they'll just show you kind of a template of what the finished animation looks like, but with just the opacity turned down a little bit, so you can kind of see every frame. Yeah. And you're like, okay, well, and then you draw it yourself, and you're like, okay, that's kind of like making sense. But I think the teachers are all hoping that the student can, like, take that template and bring whatever they kind of can to it, like exaggerating it or not. I found that with me and a lot of those first assignments, like, when it came to that kind of thing, I would always be too reserved. Mm-hmm. Not in, like, a horrible way, but just, like, I was afraid to push the motion or the energy too much, because I was like, well, I want it to be technically correct. Yeah. But it's that thing where it's like, that's where, you have to maintain this sense of spirit and freedom and kind of this tenacity to break rules. even when you're learning them, it's hard because that's what really pushes animation, I think, in a certain way. I found that like transformation animation in particular, like a certain kind of principle, I guess, is transformation. That for me, like unlocked something in me where I was like, oh my God, like you start with like the image of, say, like, you know, someone smiling, and then you have to turn it into a dog. And I was like, okay, I have to get this frame to this frame. How are we going to get there? And for me, that unlocked something that I still use and find just a lot of reward in, which is like just like changing the image, like morphing it, like, you know, exploding it out. And then I think that's connected a lot. The idea of morphing, as far as doing that to animation, is connected. That connected a lot with me, just my feelings about like, you know, my body and how much I see change in my body and how much that's such an important thing as far as like ethos towards like life is to constantly be like in this state of, you know, flux and transition. And I was like, really kind of, there was a reason why I think it was kind of that particular thing was calling to me. So I was like, oh, and I think everyone has different reasons, like what different types of, you know, elements kind of call to them.
So, I don't know if this happens based on like kind of like the way that your work is now as far as the corporate work. But do you run into like creative blocks, and how do you overcome them?
Yeah. With the corporate stuff, it is so much, like it's totally rewrapped my mind. Like it really is like two completely separate ways of using some of the same techniques. But it's like with client stuff, it's always like, what does the client want? Like, you know, what are how can we get here in a way that is, you know, sometimes not the best looking way, weirdly enough. It's sometimes like what's the fastest, or what is it? At the end of the day, it's like what they want. And it can kind of be, you know, it's sometimes I think a little difficult to find where the storytelling comes in there. Whereas in the personal kind of animation stuff, like I think the problems can be a little more interesting when it's like, oh, this is a music video or something, or like this is like a narrative. For me, I always run into things where I'm like just very visually minded when it comes to animation, or like, you know, trying to incorporate visual motifs into animation. And so everything starts to gain a meaning. Like in a music video that I did called for a Han Julius song called Saw Friends. That one was like very early on. There was a character and they were crying and the tear was like yellow, and it didn't really mean anything at the very beginning. But then that yellow glow, it started to like resemble something, and it started to become like an like iconographic thing throughout the video, where it's like, oh, this is now like, it has a metaphoric value to it. So suddenly a rule is kind of, a rule develops like very naturally, but it does, where it's like, if this tear is going to appear again, it has to be consistent with where that narrative started. Like it has to have a narrative to it. Like, if it's getting like, if they're crying at the beginning and it's coming out, that means that something wants to explode from within them. Something is like yearning to be fully realized. And so then that element, it just needs to be followed through in a way that feels like in the spirit of what the greater kind of narrative is. So that's how I work, is like suddenly all of these little like visual motifs will appear, and then they need to be consistent. And so it starts to feel like a puzzle, because it's like, okay, all these things need to follow through. If a viewer were to trace one of them, they would have to see how it, like, hopefully in a satisfying way, resolves by the end. And so it just becomes this very like, maybe not so much of a puzzle, but like that kind of thing where you see the person who's like tracking a person across the globe, and all the strings are connecting it, where it's like, okay, this is going. That's kind of how it is in my brain, at least. Like, and then someone watches it and they're just like, like weird. And I'm like, yeah. And so, Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like hovering right now and going through your Twitter and all of that stuff, because I was like, oh, this is the work I dug or what have you, because I was getting, and I don't say this in an incorrect or kind of dickish way, but I was getting like, oh, I'm getting Steven Universe off of this. I'm getting a little bit of everything here. Like,
oh, really? I mean, I love Steven Universe.
What would you say are some of the what is that number one best aspect of working in the animation field, and what is the most challenging aspect?
I think the best is definitely I think just seeing something that's kind of like internalized inside of you that gets externalized in a way that feels like it matches up. It takes a long time, but like some of the stuff that I feel the most happy about that I've made are when I look at it now, I'm just like, this really does like actually externalize something that I felt like was inside of me in a way that just I can look at it as like a reference point and be like, yeah, I still feel that way. It just feels like a part of myself that's just out there, which I think is great. And it's like why so much of the process of making animation is such a searching process, because it's like trying to find a way, at least for me, it's like trying to find a way of getting these animations or images out into the world that feels consistent with the way that you feel. And it's always surprising the way that it comes out, but you kind of sometimes I feel like know in your gut when it's like, oh, this is it. Like I'm starting up like a short film like now, and it's been quote unquote starting up. It's been like months of trying to kind of develop what the visual language of it is. Yeah. It just takes such a long time. It's so opposite to the corporate side of things where it's like, you need a finished product in 3 days. Like, and also we're going to give you like all of the assets and stuff pre-made. You just need to make the video.
Make it
where animation is complete opposite, where, yeah, it's just about honing down this thing. I think the most difficult thing is, it's definitely hard not to be comparative at times. And I think, I really kind of suffer, I think, from moments where I'm down, like really not having a perspective on self-worth, both with my art. I like really lean heavily on my art to like work through stuff emotionally in a way that can be, I think, sometimes a bit destructive. I wish that I was kinder to myself. And I think a lot of animators that I talk to also like share that sentiment where you can just really focus on the ways that you're not hitting some other benchmark that's just like pasted around the world in other people's art. And you get all of these reference points of what looks professional, what looks good, and it just can become extremely overwhelming. And so I think right now I'm still struggling to find a healthier, more kind of like, in a certain way, I want to retract from those thoughts and focus a bit more inward. But at the same time, I think I'm still looking to kind of find myself in the animation community a bit more in a way that I can come into it open-hearted and without all of these kind of like insecurities of, showing, like coming into a space and feeling like I deserve to be there, or that, I don't have to worry about, what people think, which is strange as like someone who makes a lot of animation, still being kind of insecure about my place within the community. But I think it's also a bit more of a personal thing of just, and animation, it's just one of those things where if you're super self-isolating, it can be a great artistic tool to have. But at the same time, like just animating isn't going to make you not isolate yourself. Like it can be a great like crux for that. But still then if you finish like this grand animation and you want to share it, you're still going to be like, oh my gosh, like where are my friends? Like
what's the backside of that look like? Yeah,
exactly. Like, yeah, what next? And a lot of people can get postpartum when they finish a project because there's that big question of like, oh, what's next? I definitely go through that.
And I think the thing you were describing earlier about it being something that was internalized that you're now putting out there definitely has that, like, and I don't say this lightly, but it has that, this is my baby and it's now out. And so the postpartum thing, in a very unrefined sort of analogy, it works. And it's like, oh, yeah, I have feelings around this. I don't know what's, and, you know, I fall into this area as trying to justify what I do as art or as something that's a creative practice. It's trivialized as, oh yeah, you just get on the mic and talk some shit. Like, no, I what? Maybe sometimes, not all the time. And, you know, trying to really get to the root, get to the truth, to be really corny about it, but, you know, have meaningful conversations with people about what their work is and what it's like to be a creative.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like there's so much worth in it, and like there's so much value. It's like, you know, it can take a while though sometimes for like just a random individual to kind of like find that. Mm-hmm. But you're making something that is kind of this like evergreen reservoir, like reference point for other people to find and get like a lot of, you know, direction from, or just support, like hearing that other people, what their kind of relationships with it, you know, like is. I think with animations, like you can make an animation that you feel so proud of, and it'll get 15 views on YouTube or something, and like it'll get rejected from 15 film festivals, and then you can get just really down. And I don't have like a perfect solution for that, but it is like, if you like really love it, it's just not something that's ever going to get, you know, taken away from you. Like you can't allow it to get taken away from something else. It's something that's just going to be with you forever, even if you're not like actively doing it. If you're thinking about it, that just means that it has so much meaning to you, that it's lingering, and that you're not done with it. I think it happens a lot where art can, like working in like, you know, a different kind of animation, or like working in corporate animation or something, where it can beat it out of you, or it can, your fire will get extinguished by all of these like really stressful things that come in, or you'll graduate school or be like you'll bring yourself up like as an animator or something, and you're just not going to get these like, the support will just, it won't like come to you, and it can be really disheartening. But I would just say that, you know, it's like, it's okay to take like breaks and to take time with it. And it's a lifelong thing. You're going to have breakthroughs and you're going to have setbacks. And as someone who right now is like with a project that I care about, like feeling totally at that place where I'm like, oh, I'm just hitting my head against the wall. It's never going to happen. It's like, just keep taking mental care of yourself, like emotional care, but like it's telling you something that you're still hitting your head against the wall. That means you're not done with this. You're not done with it, and you're not there yet. But that just means that it's coming. I think that's what I think faith is. Mm-hmm. The faith in those moments of the project that are at their lowest. But it's like, why do you keep going? Like, it's like some of the greatest moments I think in storytelling for me are those moments of those huge redemptive moments where someone finally breaks through to the other side, and you've seen them struggle for so long. And that's the part where, you know, having faith that like, that's you too. Like you're in that process right now, and it's going to be so great when you break through. It's just impossible to see when that's going to be. You just need to have faith it's going to happen if you keep going.
Absolutely. So In that, actually, you've answered the rest of my real questions. So I want to hit you with a couple rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap up there. How's that sound? All right. So rapid fire, we try to answer these as briefly as possible. So with these, the first one I have for you is describe the first thing that you do in a day. Like when you get up, what's the first thing that you do?
Hit the snooze button.
What is your most prized possession?
I'm actually wearing it. It's a Maya medallion that my mom gave me. My mom is, Maya descent, and she loves, passing down things to us kids. So I definitely prize this one a lot. I lost. Oh, I'm going too long, but my dad once, when I was very young, he gave me a megalodon shark tooth because I was obsessed with megalodons, sharks, and I lost that in a move. No. And I'll still be thinking about that when they bury me 6 feet under. Well, I lost the shark tooth.
Last question I have is it's in part recommendation and also question. What animation software package do you prefer to use, and what one would you recommend for a beginner?
Yeah. Oh, you're going to get a lot of answers depending on who you're talking to. If you're talking to me,
I'm talking to you.
I absolutely am a dinosaur in that I use Adobe Photoshop to animate. I started with it and I still use it. And there's a plugin that you can get called AnimDesign 2 that adds a few tiny little shortcuts, but that's what I use. I love it. You also have the Adobe suite. I guess you can use if it pertains to your work. Some people would be like, I only use Adobe Animate or I only use After Effects. For me, I use Photoshop to create things and to actually do the animation. And then sometimes I will composite it in After Effects if it's like a complicated shot or something. That's like if I was on a desert island, I would just bring Photoshop and maybe After Effects and then maybe like Premiere or something, but just those 3 programs. I'm like, this is all I need. Yeah. And then there are definitely more. Some people I think are very right in saying that that's a pretty grueling workflow. And some people use like TV Paint or, that stuff for me, it requires like a certain learning curve. I haven't found time to put into my schedule to like learn those programs. It's also, those are professional animation software. They will make your life easier in the long run if you start like pretty early on learning those, but they are expensive. So it's definitely a thing where if you're at like an animation school or something, or if you're looking to maybe find a certain way of getting them, acquiring them, I might start there in something that, is going to help you in the long run, or you'll become very weird, like me, where you get this really weird specific workflow that you just like absolutely love. And that's also, I think, good. There's no one size fits all when it comes to like animation as a personal practice.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
it helps. So I want to thank you for coming onto this podcast. And 2, I want to invite you to tell the fine folks where to check out you, your work, and all that good stuff. And again, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you can find me just nickmckernan.com. I am on Instagram at a ceilingless sky with like underscores between a ceilingless sky. Let's see. I have a Twitter, but I am so bad at Twitter. I'm one of those people that just so sucks at updating it. And occasionally I'll be like, this is a storyboard that I did for this animation that I liked. And then it'll get like 2 likes. So totally stumble upon it if you're like, oh yeah, it's not on here too much. I'm on Instagram a bit more, but yeah, you can find me in those places.
So there you have it, folks. I want to thank the great, I got to amplify the great Nick McKernan for coming on to the podcast. And yeah, I'm saying that there is art in and around your city. You just got to look for it.